上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma, in 100,000 million eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I have come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, our own Master, Dharma Master, and Dharma friends, good evening. Tonight is November 29th, I believe, 29th, 2014, and we're here in Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, about to start our lecture on the Avatamsaka Sutra, and also we're in the midst of an Amitabha retreat here, so we'll have a combination of a little bit of Amitabha Sutra, a little bit of Avatamsaka Sutra, and a little bit of Pure Land Dharma, and some sharings from various participants, as well as a DVD showing the Pure Land. The Buddha in the longer Amitabha Sutra shows Ananda, the Pure Land. So we get a chance to see the Pure Land through modern animation. So we saw it last night. It was pretty good. People were quite inspired, so we're showing it again tonight. So stay tuned. Okay, so what we do is we start the lecture by reciting the sutra name. It's on the front cover in Chinese. So I welcome everybody to put your palms together and invoke the assembly of Avatamsaka Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Navang Guang Vo Wa Yen Jing Wa Yen Ai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Navang Guang Vo Wa Yen Jing Wa Yen Ai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Navang Guang Vo Wa Yen Jing Wa Yen Ai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Navang Guang Vo Wa Yen Jing Wa Yen Ai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Navang Guang Vo Wa Yen Jing Wa Yen Ai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Navang Guang Vo Wa Yen Jing Wa Yen Ai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Navang Guang Vo Wa Yen Jing Wa Yen Ai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Okay, so I invite everyone to open up your sutra text to page 14 and 15. It's the very last page of the, 15 and 16, or 16 and 17. The very last, 16, 17? Yeah, the very last page of what we have translated. So for people who might be their first time here, or just as a quick review, we're studying the 10 grounds chapter of the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is talking about various stages of the Bodhisattva path. And right now we're on the 6th ground, and it's called the ground of manifestation. And this ground corresponds with the paramita of wisdom, of prajna. If people have studied the 10 grounds before, or studied the Avatamsaka Sutra, oftentimes the sets come in 10, and it corresponds with, in the in the Avatamsaka version, there's actually 10 paramitas. So rather than just the 6 that we usually are familiar with, there's 10 in the Avatamsaka dharmas. And so right now we're on the 6th ground, which corresponds to the 6th paramita, that of prajna, wisdom. So what we're doing now is actually studying the 12 conditioned links, or the 12 links of dependent origination. And the Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva, who is the speaker of the sutra in this portion, is explaining the 12 conditioned links for the bodhisattvas to study. And so we've gone over the list a couple of times already in the lectures. And so I'm just going to give a very quick review and read the upcoming 2 paragraphs together after I do a quick review. And that will be our main topic for tonight, in addition to some Pure Land practice. So for those who have been here before, I don't know if people remember the 12 conditioned links from memory without looking at the book. Do people know the first one? If anybody knows? Ignorance. Okay, second one? Xing. That's a Chinese. What's the English? Activities. So this says ignorance conditions activities, right? So what that means is ignorance means we don't know what's going on. So we're confused. And what that does is it creates these, you could say, activities, these very subtle habitual patterns that form our existence, right? That's the second one. What's the third one? Shi, consciousness. So it creates this consciousness, which is this discriminating consciousness that starts out. And then it conditions the fourth one, which is name and form. Sometimes you can mingse, Chinese mingse, which is sometimes considered materiality. It's basically this world we know that we see forms, we give labels to, we name it. So that arises next. So once we discriminate, we start using that discrimination to create inside and outside, and start labeling things. Then the fifth one is 六处 or 六根, 6 sense organs. So that's a little bit jargon for it's our body and our mind. Basically, our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and our 6th sense isn't a kind of special sense. It's just our mind. So basically, those are the 6 senses of Buddhism. And so what happens is, after we create inside and outside, we actually develop a sensory apparatus to perceive what's going on, right? So the 6 sense organs, people know what the next one is? Contact. 处. And that makes sense. So after we have the 6 senses, 6 sense organs, those 6 sense organs start contacting what's happening outside. And so we have contact. We have this experience of eye meeting visible object. There's a moment of contact, which then forms, not yet, feeling. So feelings is so. And feelings specifically refers to feelings of like, dislike, or neutrality. This is very specific. So when our eyes contact something like a camera that's in front of me, or this meditation cushion, I have you could say a feeling about it, or a sensation about it, and that sensation has a feeling of like, dislike, or if I don't really care about it at all, it's neutral. So those are the 3 experiences that we have when we have something come into contact with us. And that forms the next one, which is, not yet. Right in between that one though, that's the one following. Craving, you're grasping. You're jumping you grasp pretty quick. There's craving, which is next. And so basically the next one, in the sutras often says it as love. But I think craving probably is a better translation, because love is such a complicated word in English. But it's got lots and lots of meanings all packed in there. And so it's particularly referring to this sensation of going out, this desire, going out, craving. And so for things that we like, we give rise to craving. For things we don't like, we give rise to aversion or hatred. And the things that are neutral, we don't have any real want or diswant, or a hatred or love. It just kind of goes by. So that's the next step. So what's after that? Grasping. Yeah. So that's the next stage in these links. Is basically after we have this desire that moves, then we go, wow, I want it, so I take it for myself. I grasp it, right? Or if I really don't like it, then I hate it and I want to push it away. I want to run away from it, right? So that's the next stage of this cycle, and that's followed by existence. So craving, grasping, existence. Yes, that's right. Existence, existence. So you make it as part of your identity. So now we've taken this item, and now I've taken it. Now it's mine. It's part of me now. It's something I have, and that conditions. Next one is birth. So basically, it creates a whole new existence of birth. And that's followed by old age, sickness, and death, and all the sufferings that follow. So that's the 12th link. The 12th link has a lot in it: old age, sickness, and death, and lamentation, sorrow, wailing. It's all contained in the 12th link. And so that's the cycle. And that cycle is given in the span of one, in kind of this existential moment. We're in this process, as well as the process of rebirth. So this 12 conditioned links has a couple ways to approach it. One is moment to moment, and one is the cycle of rebirth. And so it's a very helpful Dharma if you want to start understanding how we got to be where we are now, or how we can cultivate in this very moment. So it has these two functions. And so the Bodhisattva here is getting actually very, you could say, precise instructions on the 12 conditioned links. From looking at the sutras, I actually think this is probably the most thorough explanation of the 12 conditioned links that I've seen. It is in the sixth ground. The Buddha goes over it a number of times in great detail. I'm also not super well read, so if anybody knows more references about where you could find more things about 12 conditioned links, you can please share with me. But in terms of what I've looked at in the Pali Canon, as well as in the Mahayana Sutras a little bit, I think this is actually a very complete explanation of the 12 conditioned links. And so that just preps us for today's passage, which is on the middle of page 16. And so what we could do is read the sutra text. So maybe, Jing Foshi, if you could read Chinese, and then how about we follow you? You read it first, and then we follow, because it's very short. 你要用一下 microphone. So Jing Foshi will read a passage, and we'll read after him, since it's not that long.
佛子，
佛子，
此中无明言行，
始终无明缘行，
乃至生言老死者，
乃至生缘老死者，
由无明乃至生为缘，
由无明乃至生为缘，
令行乃至老死不断，
令行乃至老死不断，
住成故。
住成故。
无明灭则行灭，
无明灭则行灭，
乃至生灭则老死灭则，
乃至生灭则老死灭则，
由无明乃至生不为缘，
由无明乃至生不为缘，
令诸行乃至老死断灭，
令诸行乃至老死断灭，
不自成故。
不住成故。
好，到这里。
We can read the English together. Disciples of the Buddha, when ignorance conditions activities up to and including birth conditions old age and death, have as their condition ignorance up to and including birth. They ceaselessly bring activities up to old age and death into being. When ignorance stops, then activity stops. up to and including the cessation of birth, up to and including then old age and death ceases, no longer have ignorance up to and including birth as their conditions. They eradicate the coming into being of activities up to and including old age and death. Okay, so the sutra text, I think, is explaining to us basically how to put an end to these kind of links. How to, you could say, if there's a chain, like a 12 links on a chain, how to break the chain. Last time we gave the lecture, Jing Foshu gave various stories about an axe breaking the chain, the chain. So how do we take an axe to this link and cut it open? And also before we talked about also why would we want to do that? Because doesn't this seem like very natural? Don't we just want these things to continue on, continue on and on and on? Well, the Buddha's insight is basically, no, we don't want to do this, because what this is doing to us is we're creating suffering for ourselves. And it's based on this kind of fundamental ignorance. So the idea is if we can break out of these chains, you could say, this kind of thing that's tying us down, we'll find our awakened nature, which is free of these confusions, free of all suffering, is completely unimpeded and awake. And so the Buddha is basically trying to teach us how to cultivate so that we can break out of these chains. And so the sutra text here, if I were to put in another way, oftentimes we read in the sutra text, basically this goes through the list. It says, ignorance conditions or brings about activities. And activities bring about conditions, consciousness, and goes all the way up to birth, then old age, sickness, and death. So that's what it's saying in that first paragraph. It's basically saying these are all these links that connect to each other, that when we say cause each other and also condition one another so that they all continue on, right? And then the second paragraph is basically saying how this can come to an end. So it says when ignorance stops, when we put an end to ignorance, then activity stops. And then when you have activity stops, then consciousness stops. And then name and form stop. And so the cycle starts breaking down. So basically, if you break the chain at ignorance, then the rest of the conditioned links don't continue on. So you could say the teachings in the Buddha gave is really trying to deal with that fundamental ignorance. However, I believe 2 weeks ago as well, we spoke about the sutra, or it was last week, we just spoke about the sutra. Getting all the way to that fundamental ignorance, I think is not so easy for, if we're just starting to cultivate, at least for myself, getting to see that fundamental ignorance is not so easy. And so usually the place to start is at the place of contact, feeling, craving, and grasping. Those experiences, I think, we can actually see in our day-to-day lives. Especially now, people who are doing the Amitabha session, I think if you observe your mind, you're reciting Namo Amitofo, and all of a sudden, the mind sees, somebody, or thinks of something that you remember. I need to go and, I don't know what people think about. I left the fire on at my house. The stove on in my house. Oh no. And so your mind contacts something. And since you're reciting the Buddha's name, your mind's a little bit slower. So you can see it contact, and then the feeling of aversion starting up, or you could be attraction, because you really want to go think about that thought. Right? So you get attracted by it, and then you start holding on to it, and then you take it in, and then you start a whole process with that thought in your mind. For that particular thought, it'd probably be a good one to follow if you really did leave the fire on in your house. But generally speaking, you'll find, most of the thoughts are not very useful, and you just kind of, if you don't follow it, it'll just pass right by. And you have Amitabha Buddha's name as your method, and you just hold on to that. And although these things come through your mind, you don't actually get pulled by them. So this is one way, I would say, you basically start breaking the cycle. You start breaking the links. So this is the first phase, I would say. By doing that at the beginning stage, that allows you to have deeper and deeper insights into the 12 conditioned links, so that you ultimately can get to that fundamental place of ignorance. That's the idea. So the practice that we're doing, the Amitabha recitation, is extremely relevant for this kind of ending of the 12 conditioned links, because you're basically trying to stop your mind from attaching and grasping and create an entire existence from it. So if we really can do that in the moment-to-moment experience, then we really can find a bit of liberation. So that's for the 12 conditioned links. There's another thing I wanted to share, because this is the evening of one of our Pure Land, our 3-day Amitabha retreat. And so I wanted to share some Pure Land Dharma, which I thought would be very meaningful. And it relates to 12 conditioned links you could say in a different way. And it's particularly around the topic of death. And you can see that's the 12th link, right? Old age, sickness, and death. And so in the Pure Land tradition, there's one way of looking at it, which is moment to moment, right? Moment to moment, we recite the Buddha's name, and we can be in the Pure Land in this very moment. And there's also a process is when we pass away, if we can hold on to Amitabha's name with single-minded sincerity, then we can be reborn in Amitabha's land of ultimate bliss. So I want to speak a little bit about that, because I think that's also a valuable thing to at least be aware of. Just the entire kind of, you could say, way it's set up, so that people are kind of aware of it. And if people want to believe it or follow it, I don't think it ends up being on everybody's own kind of prerogative what they would like to do. But I think it's at least good to know, is a good thing to reference. So for myself, growing up here in the West, I didn't actually have, I would say, any real faith in kind of what happened after we died. My experience, I think, growing up in America was that death was something we generally did not talk about. It was something that was basically this kind of unknown entity. You don't talk about it. Partly, I think, what I felt was there was an assumption that you really could not know. The reason that you didn't look at the top question of death was because ultimately you can't find an answer to it. So don't think about it too much. It's not really a good thing to think about, because it could just end up in depression. So don't go and look. And I thought, okay. I felt a little bit like denial to me, so I wasn't so comfortable with that approach to the question of death. So when I started looking into spirituality and religions, that was actually one of the main questions that that pushed me to search for a solution, was because I thought, there's this very big thing that happens to us all, which is that we die. And what happens next? It seemed to me, if I knew what happened next, it will make a big difference on how I live my life now. And so that was one of the main, I would say, impetuses for me to study various religions. And in Buddhism, it gives a particular version of death and what happens. And I actually thought it was fairly mature, in the sense that it said, you look at death clearly and you try to understand it. And that's what the Buddha's project was when he left the palace, was basically, he saw old age, sickness, and death. And he said, I'm going to find a solution for that. And he left the palace. And so that was, you could say, the beginning point of the Buddhist life and his Buddha's quest. And so what was the you could say answer to it? I think in the Buddhist tradition, there's various ways of approaching that question. We say there's 84,000 Dharma doors. So some people, they like to cultivate Chan or Zen. Some people like to cultivate the Pure Land. Some people like to meditate and hold mantras. Some people like to study. And some people like to hold the precepts very purely. They're all very good practices. But since tonight's on the Pure Land, and since the Pure Land actually emphasizes rebirth in the Pure Land as one of the core teachings of it, I thought it'd be valuable to at least give people a sense of what happens in the Buddhist tradition around the moment of death. And as I said, it's, I think, very useful because at the very least, we'll die and also our loved ones pass away. So knowing the kind of process is a good reference point. And so what I have, and if people would like at the end, you can take a look at it as well, is there's 2 articles by actually somewhat modern Buddhist, you can say Buddhist Dharma masters or teachers who are very reputable. One is Great Master Yin Guang, who's one of the Pure Land patriarchs, and another was by Great Master Hong Yi, who is definitely an interesting story. He was kind of like the Renaissance man of China, who was like a master of Western art and introduced Western art to China, and at one point basically went from being a really kind of in all the artistic circles and then became a very strict Vinaya precept monk and held the Vinaya very purely. And so he wrote an article about the what to do at the end of life as well. And so both of these articles I found to just very helpful advice on what you do at the moment of death. And so I was just going to go over them really briefly so just people can know that they exist, and then we can have the Dharma sharing by our community for today, as well as our DVD at the end. Okay, so what we have first is Great Master Yin Guang. Master Hua and also others kind of consider him a transformation body of great strength Bodhisattva. So last night we saw also a DVD of great strength Bodhisattva and saw a passage of the sutra where he talks about how he got enlightened from being mindful of the Buddha. And so Great Master Yin Guang was considered, you can say, a transformation body of great strength Bodhisattva. So that's a reputable source. So basically, he says, when we are near the end of life, let me just read the beginning part just to introduce it. It says, "Death is the greatest tragedy in the world, and yet no one on earth can avoid it. Thus, if you wish to help both yourself and others, you need to plan and prepare for it in advance. Death is nothing more than a fake name. At death, as a retribution from past life, which brings about this one lifetime ends, one's consciousness leaves this body and takes on another body. Those who do not know the Buddha Dharma have no way to deal with this problem and must simply endure the process of being reborn according to their karma." So there's an idea that basically when we're about to die, or when we're in the process of dying, pretty much we're kind of in a little bit of a haze. Our body becomes very sensitive to physical contact, and actually at the moment of death, our consciousness leaves our body. And when it leaves our body, it starts looking for another place to be reborn, if we're just going to be propelled by our habitual karma. And where do we get reborn? It depends on our karma. It depends on the things we've done in the past, the kind of states of mind we've practiced in the past, what we've cultivated in our minds. If we're always depressed, then we might go somewhere not so good. If we're very happy and lighthearted and giving and generous of heart, then our mind rises and we might not be in the heavens. If we recite Amitabha Buddha's name and make vows to go to the Pure Land, then we also can go to the Pure Land. So they say what really pushes us at the moment of death is karma or our vows. It's if you think about it, as Great Master Yin Guang was saying, death is something that we all will face at one time, and so we should prepare for it. It's just like if we go on a trip. Jing Hesher oftentimes gives the analogy here of if you go on if you're going on holiday and you're making a trip to, say, Europe, or you're going to go to Asia, or you're going to go maybe to the North Pole or climb a mountain, you kind of get prepared. You get if you're going to go climbing, you can get your hiking boots. If you're going to go climb on some very hard hiking places, you might get some, shoes with really kind of cleats on them with crampons on them so you can climb on the ice. You get prepared. But here, for us, we have this very important moment of transition, which is called death. And how are we preparing for it? So that's a question that Buddhism really asks us. And I think when you have that really clear in your mind, all of a sudden, all the things in the world have another perspective to it. It's not to say, money, wealth, fame, sex, food, and sleep. The 5 desires are not really attractive, and so we want to repress ourselves and say we don't want to go after those things because they're bad for us. It's because we see that because death is coming, those things don't last. We can make all the money we want in the world. We can, eat all the good food we want in the world. We can make ourselves as healthy as possible. But in the end, death comes and it's kind of like restart, game over, restart, start up again. And so those things ultimately don't last. So the Buddha is saying, don't spend your time on those things. Spend your time on something that will actually bring you ultimate benefit in this precious human existence. So he's teaching us, okay, use this contemplation of death to help us reprioritize our lives and prepare for what's going to happen next. So then Great Master Yinguang says, since we've heard about the thus come ones, Pure Land practice that can save all living beings, we should recite Amitabha Buddha's name with faith and determination, so as to make appropriate provisions for our rebirth in the Pure Land. Then when the time comes, we will be able to avoid the illusory suffering of the revolving cycle of birth and death, and can realize the true bliss of eternal nirvana. When your father, mother, brothers, sisters, or other family members contract a serious illness and cannot be cured, you should be filial and compassionate, and exhort them to recite Amitabha Buddha's name to seek rebirth in the Pure Land. Moreover, you may help them recite with a recitation group. When this sick person dies in this situation, he or she can be born in the Pure Land. How can we ever give a name to this kind of benefit? So basically, Great Master Yinguang recommends having a recitation group, an Amitabha recitation group, and we actually have one in Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. I don't know if people know. It's made up by the lay community here because as the monastics, we generally don't leave the monastery to help recite the Buddha's name outside, mostly because what has happened in Asia is that the monastics end up doing that all the time, so they don't have time to cultivate in the monastery. So what we do though is we really encourage the lay people that they have a group to cultivate together, and they go and support each other when people pass away. And so I wanted to share one story about this. In my experiences before I left home, being with people reciting for people when they pass away. I actually remember one story, which was my mother's best friend's daughter, who actually had cancer at a very young age, I think in her 20s. She was a UC Berkeley student, and she passed away. And I remember going down to visit the hospital. It was actually during the Chan session at CDB. I think it was probably 2006, 2007, probably December, in the middle of the Chan session. And I remember getting a call from my mom saying to come down because she was passing away. And at that time, my mom was still fairly upset with me being in the monastery and want to be a monk. So I thought it was kind of interesting because it was only at this time that being a Buddhist was somewhat useful. All the other times it was, oh gosh, there's embarrassment to the family. Well, if somebody's dying, so all of a sudden, David's at the monastery, we should call him down to help out. So all of a sudden I had some use. So I came down, and since I was in the middle of a Chan session, actually I was really focused, because if you're in the Chan session, you're just sitting there all the time. So I was actually fairly focused. I just came down and I was there, and the family was somewhat Buddhist. The mom side is kind of Buddhist. The dad side was more scientific. Actually, one of these beliefs in Asian society was that to not recite the Buddha's name, because when you recite the Buddha's name, you're like asking the person to leave. So you don't want to recite the Buddha's name for them, because then you're asking them to leave. That's not very nice. And so what happened before that was my mom and her friend were trying to recite for her daughter, but then the father side of the family said, no, you don't want to recite for her because that's not being very nice. We want her to stay, get all her friends to come and, make her happy, et cetera, et cetera. But basically at one point, she fell into a very deep coma. And so basically, the father side of the family quieted down and realized, well, this is probably, the very end. So they kind of just let my mom's friend kind of take over in terms of recitation. And so I remember coming down and I just went to the hospital, and actually I was kind of prepared to stay there for quite a while, because if people are in a coma, you never know how long they're going to stay there in that state, right? I think people, I had a friend who was in a coma for quite a few years. And so I thought, maybe this might take a while. So, we just recite and transfer merit for this person, for our friend. And so I remember getting down there, and she was basically at that point no longer eating. And so it was a very late stage of cancer. And I remember that there was the heart beating machine going deet, 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 deet. And all of a sudden there was this kind of alarm started going off. And the father got a little bit anxious and started rubbing her hand and saying, "Don't worry, we're here, we'll take care of you. Don't worry, we're here." And then started applying some chapstick on her mouth because her lips were very dry. And so I was just on the side, just reciting Amitabha Buddha's name, just kind of on the side quietly. And after I saw him do that, I took him outside and I kind of talked with him briefly, and I told him, not to give you any pressure whatsoever. I know that you're not probably coming from a Buddhist faith, but I just want to explain to you just at least what Buddhism thinks about the process of rebirth, process of death, so that at least you know kind of what is going on. It's not, you don't have to believe it. And I explained to him, at this very last moment when people pass away, usually their bodies are very, it's like if you can imagine when you're really sick, you're even like a breeze that blows by your body, you can feel like chills, it's really painful. So it says at the time of death, our bodies becomes very, very sensitive. And so we actually try not to touch the body, because if you touch the body, you might cause pain to the person, and their mind basically gets afflicted. And at the end of their life, you want them to leave as peaceful as possible. And that's the idea. So we try not to touch the body. I explained to him. And then I said, well, also in this time, what can we do? The most important thing is to actually be peaceful at heart ourselves. Because also, there's this idea that, and it's kind of interesting because it's also confirmed by being, when I was trying to do hospice up in the sit-down Buddhas, they have hospice training. But basically they say when you're about to pass away, you're kind of in this kind of spirit realm. You kind of leave your body, and you literally call it the intermediate skandha body. And basically you leave the body, and they say that you actually have a lot of spiritual abilities. And one of the spiritual abilities, as people know, is called ability to read people's thoughts. So they say when you're in that realm, you can actually see into the minds of other people. And so actually I was thinking, reciting the Buddha's name is really good because your mind can be very peaceful. And so if they see you reciting, they can see the light of Amitabha, then your mind is light, is awake. But if you're really worried and anxious, that just creates more anxiety for the person who's suffering, who's about to pass away. If nothing else, you have to think about the whole spirit realm. People, I think, are connected through, just our physical ambiance, just our body. So if we're anxious, if I'm really anxious, the person next to me can feel that I'm anxious. If I'm very peaceful, people next to me can feel that I'm very peaceful. So at the same time, when people are passing away, we want to refrain from being really, really sorrowful, really, really holding on to the person, saying, don't leave, we're here for you, don't leave. Because at the end of their life, the body is falling apart, and we just have to leave. There's nothing else we can do. And I remember her father's telling me, yeah, I could see her heart rate. Her heart rate's going at like 120 or 130, or basically, it's like she's like running a marathon constantly in this last, couple of days. It's just constantly, her heart's just working really, really hard. And, I said, well, maybe she's just trying to hold on. She's trying to be here for people she can see caring about her. And so, the body's deteriorating, and in the end, you can't hold on forever. The body has to go. This is the causes and conditions. So rather than trying to fight it to the last breath, if you could just let go and transition on, that's the best. And so I said, what's the best thing we can do now is just recite Amitabha Buddha's name and just let go and wish them a happy transition wherever they go. And if nothing else, if even this is not really what's going on, at least you'll be peaceful, and at least this whole process will be very peaceful for her. And so we went back into the room and I started reciting. And then I started sitting there and I started reciting again, and then I looked up and I saw her father. Her mother actually went to sleep because she saw me there, so she just went to sleep. So somebody else would recite for her, so she went to sleep. And my mom, I don't know if she was sleeping too, but we were reciting, and I looked at her father, and I was really impressed because his face was super, super sincere. I could see he just put down everything. He was just reciting with a single focused mind. And it was really interesting, but all of a sudden the machine started beeping again, went tee, 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 and he just instinctively he just turned off the machine. In terms of the alarm, not like the machine, but he turned off the beeping machine and he just continued reciting, not distracted at all. And then all of a sudden he stopped breathing. And he started, and so I was like, so then I nudged the mom to wake up. Her mom kind of wakes up because it's like she's actually passing away right now. And so she actually stopped breathing, and I would say, that, passed away. And then the idea is after one person passes away, Great Master Ingguang explains it as well, is that you want to stay next to them for about 8 hours to 12 hours, and not move the body, not touch the body immediately after. Just because, as I said, right when you touch the body, right when somebody dies, they can feel pain, and then they will, give rise to kind of afflictions or unhappiness. So it's much better to be able to leave the body. And so actually we were at the Stanford Hospital, so they were nice, and they said you could just stay next to her and recite. And some hospitals, they have like various procedures. So like right when somebody passes away, the nurse has to come in and do all the various vital signs to proclaim the person dead. So when my grandmother passed away, the hospital said, just tell us 12 hours later that she's dead. Just don't tell us she's dead until 12 hours later. Because we talked to her, we talked to the hospital beforehand. They said, okay, don't tell us until later when she's dead, 12 hours later. So basically, so that's one thing just to pay attention to if you're in the hospital in the West, because I think in the West people don't have these ideas at all. But I think in the West people are actually very respectful of other people's faiths. So if we put the request in, oftentimes people are respectful of it. And so my sense is, so basically we recited for her for maybe 8 hours or 12 hours, and basically people took turns. I think at that time I just stayed in the room and just recited the whole time because, as I said, I was in the middle of a Chan session, so sitting for many hours a day, so 8 hours in the Amitabha recitation wasn't too much. And so we recited for her, and it was really interesting because the whole atmosphere became very, very peaceful. And then she just passed away. It was actually a very interesting experience because also when she passed away, they asked another monk, since our monks don't really go out of the monastery, they asked another monk from a nearby Chinese monastery to come, and he talked to her about this process of death, how the bodies starts breaking up, and what the experiences are, and just tell her, you're dead, don't hold on, let go, and just explain to her the process of death. And then he left, and we just recited the Buddha's name. And through this whole process, everybody, I think, was very, very peaceful, and she just passed away. And in the end, her father's sister, who was, I think, a professor of maybe psychology in Taiwan, was driving back with me and said, I don't know what to make of it, of that whole entire experience. But my brother this whole experience seems to be positive for him. That's a very strange experience, given that she's a kind of a cultural anthropologist, psychologist. I think she's cultural anthropology actually was her area of study. And so so this experience, she just went back and I don't really know what to make of the entire experience ultimately, but on reflection, after going back home and getting rest and waking up the next morning, I thought to myself, why did she pass away at that moment? Why did she pass away at that moment? Because I was expecting her to stay there maybe, 1 or 2 days at least. Maybe she'd take a while. And then I thought, because her father let go. That was my conclusion. But because her father let go, she probably was holding on for her father. And when she saw her father let go of her, needing her to stay, then she'd go off to wherever she was going to go. And I think if people do little bit of research into, say, near-death experiences, oftentimes that's what they say why people come back, is because somebody doesn't let go and then they come back. And there's that instance. And so anyways, that's just a process that I saw. This actual whole story, which I won't go into the more details of it, this saga continues because basically what happened was the monk of the monastery started explaining. So the next morning I woke up and my mom says, there's another crisis. I said, what's the crisis? Well, the monk wants to do a kind of Buddhist ceremony for her as a part of her like memorial and funeral. And she grew up kind of like me in secular Western society. And so it's like, that's in complete conflict with our like, what we normally do. Like all our friends want to celebrate her life, and the monks talking about wanting to do this kind of very traditional Buddhist ceremony. So what do we do? So it says, you can go talk with the monk, like, okay, I'll go try to talk to this monk about a Western culture and how, this is not a time to like try to teach the Dharma and like propagate the Dharma because, it's a different culture. So the saga continued, but I just wanted to share that experience because I think it's a very important, if people really are interested, is that Buddhism actually teaches, at least particularly in the Pure Land tradition of Amitabha Buddha and the Pure Land tradition, teaches a lot about the process of rebirth. And there's a lot of stories about people going off to rebirth as well and being successful. Basically at the time of death, they know the time of its coming, they sit up upright, they're peaceful of mind, they recite the Buddha's name, and off they go. There's quite a few stories like that, and it's not you don't have to go too far to find modern day examples of that. So it's a very powerful teaching, if nothing else, about this process of rebirth. And so for me at least, it's a very interesting story, worth investigating and looking into, and made a big impact on my life. So if you're interested, I have these 2 articles which both Great Master Yingguang and Great Master Hongyi talk about what's the process, what to do at the time of death if you're cultivating the Pure Land tradition. So I won't go into that too much more because we want to save time for our evening people sharing their experiences as well as our DVD movie. So actually one more thing I wanted to do, maybe on a lighter note than death, is on our songbooks. I don't know if people could pass out the songbooks. I took them out. There's actually one song I really liked. And since we're in the Amitabha session, I thought it's very appropriate to you could say chant or sing. It's called Never Stop Reciting on page 14. And it's sung to the tune, I think it's a Christian song called How Can I Keep From Singing? Reverend Heng Sher wrote this song in Buddha Root Farm. And I remember he wrote it, I think right before in the trailer, and then he came and sang it for all of us. And I was really moved by the song. I thought, wow, that's a really good song. And I tried to memorize the lyrics for myself. But it just has a really joyful spirit to it. And I think that's one of the things also in Amitabha Buddha recitation. It says you should recite the 10 times with sincerity and joy. It's not sincerity and misery, it's sincerity and joy. So this is a note. You want to recite with joy. And I think this song really captures that spirit. So when the end of life comes, you meet it with joy. You know, you got Amitabha Buddha's light carrying you. No problem. Okay, so if you know the tune, you can just join right in. Otherwise, you can just listen. So everybody has the book? Page 14. Never stop reciting. Okay. A Buddha named Eternal Light made vows to save creation. He made a land where suffering's gone, a place of liberation. So use his vows and be reborn, in lotus flowers delighting. You simply keep his name in mind and never stop reciting. The Saha land is a place of pain, with struggle and contention. To find a world of utmost bliss, you first set your intention. Those men or women, rich or poor, in rebirth not delighting, apply themselves with a single mind and never stop reciting. I praise the Buddha's compassionate vows with melodies unending. My body lives in the world of woe. My heart is world transcending. With bodhisattvas joyfully, I'll soon be reuniting. Until I reach Amitabha's land, I'll never stop reciting. So rich and... I remember there's a chorus to it, but okay. I guess that's it. So that's the verse. I think there's a chorus. I don't know if people remember. So set your mind to be reborn with melodies unending. I guess this might be just the last verse. My body lives in the world of woe. My heart is world transcending. And so then you recite Amitabha Buddha's name. Yeah. So I really like that tune and those lyrics. I think it really captures Amitabha's spirit. Okay, so with that, maybe we can invite tonight's Dharma speakers to come up and share some of their Dharma experiences. I think. Oh yeah, you have a question?
I just had a quick comment. What you're talking about, the process of like leaving the body and death. It's interesting. There was a recent study that just the conclusion happened. It's called the AWARE study that happened in Britain, and they studied cardiac arrest patients, and they found that indeed, like the near-death experiencing, like you were talking about, they basically verified that, but it was in like a scientific setting that their consciousness was going beyond like brain patterns. So it just felt like something worth mentioning.
Wow, that's interesting. So he's just saying that, when was this study done?
It's been done over the last 4 years, and it just ended like this month.
Okay, so over this last 4 years, there was a study that just ended this month in, where? Britain? Great Britain? In Great Britain, they were studying, I guess, people passing away, particularly cardiac arrest, and that they found that there is something that the consciousness leaves that is not explained by physical body phenomenon, I guess. It's not just biological phenomenon. So he's just saying that confirmed that there might be something more to life than just the process of death. Consciousness continues on. So that's what the Buddha says. And so, yep, sounds good. Okay. So if people would like to come up, I think it's Phil and Angela, right? Phil and Angela. So please, we're just going to share some experiences. You can please come up. Yeah. Who wants you to speak first? Phil? Okay. So people know we've been doing an Amitabha session starting from some people come at 4 a.m., very, very few, 4 a.m. in the morning. Some people come usually around 8 o'clock and for our first recitation, and we go all the way to about 5 o'clock. And then we have evening ceremony as well as our evening lecture. And for some people, they also took the 8 precepts to start out the retreat. So some people have been holding the 8 precepts as well. Okay, so maybe... Phil, you ready? Or ladies first? Okay. Oh, bodhisattvas don't go first. I'll let. Oh, Jing Fosher said you should go first.
Oh, okay. Amitabha. I was asked to speak and agreed, but I was unable to come up with anything to say. You know, when sitting in the assembly, many ideas come across your mind. And there are lots of things you want to say, but it's different when you're asked. So I'll just say a little about the slow walking recitation of Amitabha's name. My heart is racing. And I just want to appreciate and respect the Dharma brothers and sisters who help us sustain this practice. I also want to respect the Dharma masters here as well. So I just want to share some insights, only because some may be frustrated with this Dharma door, which is a slow walking meditation. And for those who are new at the same time, you know, I don't want to deny you the opportunity to gain insight on your own. But I just want to make sure that you get a little bit of insight so that you'll stay instead of being frustrated and unsatisfied. So Dharma brother Joa mentioned yesterday how you should take the steps, and he kind of demonstrated how you should hold yourself. So at first you think you're taking a half step, but in the beginning it's actually a whole step. And for some it's a normal step. This will get you into trouble very quickly. What troubles, you may ask? The short answer is frustration. Or in the first noble truth, it was like dukkha, you know, it's like, oh, why is this so slow, you know? And I want you to see the beauty of this method. So I'm going to share this because of the short introductory period that you have. You have only 1 hour, you know. And it's better, again, to gain the insight on your own, but I don't want you to be so unsatisfied. Why unsatisfied? Because the little mind, the monkey mind, is accustomed to the excitement of the senses. We just came from rushing to get here on time, fighting the traffic, preparing the food, ensuring everything is ready, getting up earlier than Thanksgiving, interrupting my holiday, which I deserve to sleep in. That's one view, you know, missing Black Friday, you know, and all those great discounted sales. Probably don't need it. So this method is not to excite your skandhas, your 6 outflows, but it is to engage your senses in a manner, you know, to keep it occupied so that you can give it a rest a little bit so you gain some true insights. Your body is engaged with walking and breathing. Your mouth is engaged with speaking the Buddha's name. Your ears are engaged with the sounds of the Buddha's name. Your mind is engaged with Amitabha Buddha. You are focused, single-minded, sort of like in a Buddha zone, you know, in a manner of speaking. One example, when you begin the journey with this expedient method, and it is an expedient, like all methods, you will immediately remark, this is slow. I mean, really slow. That's the first observation. And the first reaction, of course, in this culture is too slow for me. So half the new participants are kind of gone after the first day, right? And even maybe the first hour, right? How can you sustain something like this for 24 hours and for the next 10 days, right? And we just had somebody come back from China, experience a 10-day retreat, 24 hours a day. When you continue, however, your monkey mind starts asking questions. And here is the real learning. It's not a teaching per se, but a learning. Why is this so slow? This certainly can't be the way with a capital W, you know. Maybe I'll give it a try for 1 hour only, the monkey mind will say. For sure, not a whole day. 24 hours continuously? Absolutely not. Certainly could not last that long. It'll be so boring. I would rather be eating, shopping, entertaining, you know, something else. The monkey mind continues. Why can't the people move faster? I'm going to bump right into them. Did you ever get that feeling? They can't be doing this right. I'm stumbling over myself. I can't get this right. Is it the right foot when they say Amitabha? Or is it the left foot that I start? And I'm starting to lose my balance. You know, the monkey mind continues, you know, the tune. Man, this is different. This isn't the way we do it at CTDB. It's so low. You know? Am I getting the words right? What if I recite it incorrectly? Do I get to the Pure Land? The monkey mind continues. Is this a monastery in China on the right path? You know, what if I like this method? Will I not reach enlightenment? You know, nirvana? If I practice this, did Venerable Master teach this? And the monkey mind continues on and on. The sole purpose of the little monkey mind is to give you comfort, to maintain your status quo. It asks all these questions so you can know, to name it, and align with what is different, with who you are, what you believe in. In short, your self. The monkey mind is comforted once it identifies these questions. It kind of settles your mind, so to speak. Your perceptions of who you are hard to change. Thus, trying something new is uncomfortable. It is unsure and tends to avoid what is uncomfortable. Habits are hard to change. Weight is hard to lose. Learning takes time. Language is difficult to learn. Mistakes are hard to correct. It goes so far as to lock you into poverty, states of suffering, craving, or on the other side, riches, status, and fame. And thus the 12 conditional links continue. In fact, the methods are practiced so you can change yourself. That's why you're here, to change, to understand the underlying activities and behaviors of goodness. How the operating system works, as those of you who understand computers, so you can reconfigure via repentance. To change and transform, to flip thoughts around, success and failure, happiness and sadness, poverty and riches. And just changing one thought will do. Just one thought. Via inspiration, motivation, kindness, giving, compassion, wisdom, and become a better person. Not infallible, but better. So continue to journey and continue to walk. Amitabha.
All Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, Dharma Masters, and Dharma friends, Amitabha. My name is Angela Justice, and my Dharma name is Chin Dao. On the second day of this Amitabha retreat, I want to express my deep gratitude to all of the Dharma friends that have made this possible. When the days are short and the nights are long and dark, gathering in the Buddha hall and celebrating the Buddha of infinite light and life is the most wonderful place to be. After 2 days reciting, everyone appears lighter and brighter, and this seems like a wonderful way to begin the holiday season, full of Dharma joy. If I may, I'll share a little bit about my background, because this is a very special practice for me and not one that I've spent a lot of time in. I was raised predominantly in a Catholic family and grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and became interested in Buddhism when I was in high school. In an IB Theory of Knowledge class, I found a book of Buddhist sutras, and it really interested me. And by the time I got to college, I was really interested in learning about meditation. And I went to go look for a meditation group, or 2 or 3. I studied Dzogchen and Vipassana and Zazen was the one that stuck for a while. And took a few classes about Buddhism. The texts that really resonated with me were the Prajna texts. I claim no level of understanding or comprehension, but I found myself very drawn to the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra and any book about meditation I could find. So 12 years ago, when I graduated college, I found my way here, about a month after I graduated. And I knew that many people here recited the Buddha's name, and it was a primary method of cultivation, but I didn't think I could connect with it, so I left it alone. It sounded completely the opposite of Chan, or Zen, which had been my Dharma door to that point, and the Prajna text, which had captured my interest. And then one day, a good and wise advisor explained to me that reciting the Buddha's name was actually a very good Chan practice. You put down all your false thoughts that arise, and you let them go. You pick up the Buddha's name and recite it single-mindedly without pause, and when you can do that, there's no space for false thoughts. And when you do that, how can you help but be at peace and in accord with all beings and effortlessly hold precepts? If you can recite single-mindedly without pause, your Buddha nature is sure to emerge naturally. And once we can put down our false thoughts, he said, you don't even have to wait until the end of life to go to the Pure Land. You can be there right now. This explanation made sense to me. And later, when I read the Sixth Patriarch Sutra, chapter 3, I really liked Magistrate Wei's explanation and his questions to Master Huineng. This section is spoken to the conditions of the person requesting it and beautifully illustrates the power of intention and the extreme importance of vows. Vows are a cultivator's lifeline. They are the active day-to-day commitment to doing wholesome actions that nourish the Bodhi resolve in others and in themselves, and also help them turn away from confused thinking, bad habits, unskillful behaviors that would ultimately cause harm and turn living beings away from realizing their true nature. For me personally, actively taking vows were what took me from sitting on the sidelines to participating in a more wholehearted way. Before I made vows, it was as if I was admiring everyone else's lotus with great enthusiasm and interest while lacking the confidence to believe I could grow my own. For a couple of years, I've been to many classes here over the years, but a few years ago, Reverend Heng Sure was leading Thursday night roundtables. And for a winter, he really focused in, spending a lot of time talking about vows. And he emphasized that sages are free and can choose where they go because they have vows. And they choose where they go because they've cultivated wisdom and realized their true nature, and their compassion for all sentient beings has naturally arisen. This profound and correct type of right understanding allowed them to untie the links of karma until they were liberated from suffering and affliction. And when they were liberated, they chose to help others. And they did this with the power of their vows. And in that class, we talked about Amitabha's vows and Samantrabhadra's vows, Guanyin Bodhisattva's vows. And he even talked about how in the early days, when Gold Mountain was first established, the Venerable Master encouraged disciples to write their own vows. So after a few of these talks, I decided that vows sounded like a pretty good Dharma door, and I was ready to start taking a few. But maybe before I did, I thought I would test the waters by seeing what it was like when other people took vows. So when Reverend Heng Sure mentioned he was going to give a Dharma talk at Gold Sage, and before the Dharma talk, he would offer the 8 precepts on Bodhidharma's birthday, I decided to drive down to observe. Please remember I did not Buddhist family and was never handed a manual explaining the different types of precepts before this. I was very familiar with 5, but I had not formally accepted them. I knew about the Bodhisattva precepts and the monastic precepts, but not in any level of detail. So when I arrived, I was somewhat surprised when I realized that the idea in my head was completely wrong. The 8 precepts wasn't like a graduation ceremony where the people in the front took precepts, while in the back, all of the supportive, less devout supporters cheered them on. But it was an occasion where everybody all together took them. So when I arrived and I was there and I realized what was happening, I figured that the causes and conditions had come together, so I might as well go for it. So when we got to precept number 6, no wearing perfume or adornments, I took out my earrings and put them in my purse. This is the comedy hour. By eliminating certain adornments, entertaining, and eating at noon, I realized I had no idea what to do with the rest of my Sunday. I spent it writing and meditating and was surprised by how loud the internal volume of my thoughts was. My thinking was so cluttered with must-remembers, should-dos, a lot of want-to-dos, feelings, random thoughts. And I sat with it. And then 3 weeks later, I had a very vivid dream, which I think was tied to that experience. And it inspired me to deepen my resolve and take my cultivation very seriously. I decided at that time I was not ready to formally take the 5 precepts, but I would try to keep them as if I already had. And during that time, I became fascinated by the power of vows. And it really resonated with me, the idea that I should write my own based on the principles that I held the most dear and the gifts that I most wanted to offer to others. There came a moment when I felt the time was right, and I was finally ready to accept the 5 formally. And when that happened, it felt as if I had come off the sidelines. And after so many years of attending Dharma talks and learning meditation, I realized I really wanted to deepen my resolve and understand Buddhism not just on an intellectual level, but an experiential level. I didn't consciously pick the holiday, but it just so happened that I took precepts on Amitabha's birthday. And a few months after I took the precepts, I had an experience where I was staying overnight at the City of 10,000 Buddhas, my first night at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. And Stacy took me to evening ceremony. And I remember circumambulating while reciting the Buddha's name and realizing in that moment everything was okay. It was beautiful, in fact. And that moment would have never happened without vows. It would have never happened without the vows of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the Venerable Master and all of the disciples who helped build the City of 10,000 Buddhas and all of the people, the Dharma masters and the Dharma friends that were practicing. We would not be here now in this session without the compassionate vows of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, the Sangha, and our fellow cultivators. So if I can urge you to try a Dharma door and you're new to Buddhism, please consider reciting the Buddha's name. Don't wait as long as I did. It's not fancy, but it's simple. It can be used anywhere at any time. It will purify your thoughts and help you leave worry behind. And if you're ever confused in your cultivation or unclear, I encourage you just to be diligent and patient. Ask questions from teachers at appropriate time, and if you're patient and have persistence, everything will naturally become clearer. And I would also encourage you not to be afraid to take vows, and certainly not to take over a decade like I do. The vows bring cultivation to life. Amitabha.
We have two very good Dharma talks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
我们后面有 DVD，我想一样的，大家可以把你们送到极乐世界去，但是就是大家要用心，这样子，不管我们有多少时间，可能20分钟或者40分钟，看看，大家去享受一下极乐世界。好，阿弥陀佛。
Want to bring everybody to the Pure Land, so we have a DVD that shows the Pure Land and what it looks like, or one rendition of it. So we'll bring the screen down, and we can watch the video. It's quite good. So I don't know if you're reciting the Buddha's name to be that exciting. I think if your recitation is that exciting, you might want to be a little bit careful. But yeah, you can see definitely comics meet the Dharma. Yeah, that kind of. So the transference of merits on the back of your sheet here. The dedication of merit. So how this works is for an evening of, or a whole day of cultivating, reciting Buddha's name and looking into principle and reflecting on kind of some important questions of life. There's some merit that we have, and the idea is to give it away, to transfer beings. And so if people have anybody you would like to give it to, or a cause, or various things in the world that you want to improve, now is the time to do it. I guess, Alan, you're not going to play, right? Okay. So we can just chant the dedication of merit. Okay, so after watching the movie, we probably want to calm down our minds a little bit. Take a couple deep breaths, and then we can chant. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. And stand and bow to the Buddhas. Avatamsaka